So this article shouldn't really be a surprise at all. And I'm adding this in here because of all of the things that have been happening. I mean, if you just look on the internet and see some of the things that are happening all over, it is pretty depressing. If you think about, some of the things that have been recently happening where, some of these famous people have been, willingly taking their lives. And you would think that they have these perfect lives. And I've said this before. I feel like some people live their life through famous people because sometimes you want to see the good things. You want to see people successful because then it kind of gives you a little bit of hope, and you start thinking, maybe there is some good, some hope out there. If you see somebody having a successful relationship or a successful career, but when you see that a person who you thought to be successful, they have a lot of fame or they have a lot of money, they have a lot of notoriety. They seem like an upbeat person, and all of a sudden you hear they've hung themselves or they took their life. I mean, it's depressing, and I believe that's partly the reason why some of these suicide rates have gone up. Into this, I'm gonna be honest. I believe a lot of people are worried because when you hear things about the administration, the way things have been going, not everybody feels like it's in their favor because of some of the things that we've been experiencing. And two, also when you hear about the homelessness and, all the people that don't have places to live, and then how high, housing costs are, and heartbreaking stories about, child abuse and things like that. And so what do you expect people? But one state between 1999 and 2016, with increases seen across age, gender, race, and ethnicity, according to the report released Thursday by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. So, in more than half of all deaths in 27 states, the people had no known mental health condition when they ended their lives. The recent one was Kate Spade, and then there was a chef who also took his life. I had to read it because at first I thought he died of natural causes, but he actually took his life, and I had to rewind. I was like, wait a minute. I said, isn't that the guy who he had an excellent show? I think he was on a food show. He was like a food critic, Anthony Bourdain. He's pictured right here. And there's an article about him. And then, you know, it's just really, sad. And then that thing with Robin Williams, I think that did something to me because I really like Robin Williams, his comedy and stuff. I remember, I might be telling my age, but I remember back when he was on that show. For those of you who are around my age, it was Mork and Mindy. And then he did some stand-up comedy. But anyway, it goes on to say that in North Dakota, the rate had jumped from more than 57%. And in the most recent period, studies have showed that in 2014 to 2016, the rate has been highest in Montana at 29.2 per 100,000 residents. And so compared with the national average of 13.4 per 100,000. So suicide rates are on the rise across the nation, but nowhere more so than in the rural communities is where they see a lot of it. And so in Nevada, it was recorded a decline at 1% for overall period, although its rate remained higher than the national average. So increasingly, suicide is being viewed not only as a mental health problem, but a public one. a public health one. So nearly 45,000 suicides occurred in the US of 2016. 45,000. That's wow. People willingly taking their lives. And then also, I'm kind of digressing. There was a DJ recently. I don't really recall what his name was, but he was pretty popular with the young crowd. And he also took his life. And I believe he was really getting popular. He was really getting a lot of notoriety, and he took his life as well. So it goes on to say that more than twice the number of homicides, making it the 10th leading cause of death among people ages 15 to 34. Suicide is the second leading cause of death. Most common method across all age groups was the firearms, because, school shootings, which that's disturbing and depressing. We've been hearing a lot about that. So, that's extremely depressing. So the data are disturbing. And Shoot Chat, the CDC's principal deputy director, she had stated, so the widespread nature of the increase in every state but one really suggests that this is a national problem. Oh, so you're just now seeing that hitting most communities. It's hitting many places especially hard. So a half of the state's suicide among people ages 10 and older increased more than 30%. At what point is it a crisis? Asked Nadine Caslow, a past president of the American Psychological Association. Suicide is a public health crisis when you look at the numbers, and they keep going up. It's up everywhere. And we know that the rates are actually higher than what is reported. But the homicides still get more attention. That's the school shootings and all the, killings and the things that we see that happen, in local neighborhoods and whatnot. So one factor of the rising rate is the mental health professionals, as well as the economists and sociologists and epidemiologists, is that the Great Recession that hit 10 years ago, and a 2017 study, the journal Social Science and Medicine, showed the evidence that the rise in the foreclosure, homelessness, people losing their homes, a lot of it happened in the economic downturn. So it's that concussive downturn was associated with the overall and the marginal increase in suicide rates. So the increase was higher for white males than any other race or gender or group or however. Research for many years and across social and health science fields has demonstrated a strong relationship between economic downturns and the increase in deaths due to suicide. So Sarah Burgard, an associate professor of sociology at the University of Michigan, explained in the email on Thursday, the dramatic rise of opioid addiction also can't be overlooked. Experts say through untangling accidental from intentional deaths by overdose can be difficult. So the CDC has calculated that the suicide from opioid overdose nearly doubled between 1999 and 2014. And data from the 2014 national survey showed that the individuals addicted to prescription opioids had a 40% to 60% higher risk of suicidal ideation. So habitual users of opioids were twice as likely to attempt suicide as people who did not use them at all. So high suicide numbers in the U.S. are not a new phenomenon. Of course not. So in 1999, the Surgeon General, David Satcher, issued a report on the state of mental health in the country and called suicide a significant public health problem. The latest data at the time showed 30,000 suicides a year. So Caslow is particularly concerned about what has emerged with the suicide among women. So the report findings came just 2 days after the 55-year-old fashion designer Kate Spade took her own life in New York. Action her husband attributed to the severe depression that she had been battling with, because they were going to have a separation or a divorce. I believe he wanted to divorce, is what I recall. And a couple of the articles, but historically, men had the higher death rates than women. So Caslow noted that. So that's equalizing, not because men are committing suicide less, but women are doing it more. And that is very, very troublesome. And so I believe this is sort of like a commercial right here. But anyway, try to close that. So among the stark numbers in the CDC reports was the one signaling a higher number of suicides among people with no diagnosed mental condition. Like they had no known health conditions or anything that were related that would have promoted, the suicide. So in 27 states that use that use the National Violent Death Reporting System, 54% of suicides fell in this category. But Joshua Gordon, the director of National Institute of the Mental Health, said that the statistics must be viewed in context. When you do a psychological autopsy and go and look carefully at the medical records and talk to the family members of the victims, he said 90% will have evidence of mental health conditions. But the incidents at large portions were diagnosed with suggested that to me that they are not getting the help that they need. So um, I don't know how they treat these things nowadays. I guess, if you have like certain careers, occupations, they offer like mental health services, but I would think now they would probably offer it a little more often now because suicide rates have gone up. They might look at it as a priority at this point in time. Um, So culturally, attitudes may play a role or a part in this as well. So those without a known mental health condition, according to the report, were more likely to be males and belong to a racial or ethnic minority, which, culturally, some groups think, oh, you'll just be all right. Oh, have a drink, go out and go party, or go look at a movie or whatever. And, it'll go away and all that, or you're a man. Men don't cry, and men don't, don't be weak, man up. We've heard those things, but, you know, men and women both suffer from depression. It's not just a one gender thing. And children can suffer from depression. I mean, look at what's going on in the schools. There's a lot going on in these schools. So the data supports that we know what we know about the notion, Gordon said, that men and Hispanics especially are less likely to seek help. And the problems most frequently associated with suicide, according to the studies, are strained relationships, life stressors, of course, often involving work and finances. Money is usually a cause of it, and divorce, substance use problems, physical health conditions, um, the recent or impending crises. The most important takeaway the mental health professionals say is that suicide is an issue not only or for the mentally ill, but for anyone that is struggling with serious lifestyle problems, what they said here, like finances, your work. And, I'm going to add this in there. Um, Sometimes, people, they have a lot of demands on their lives. They have a lot of stress, and to maintain a particular lifestyle, if you're, and this is for people, if you make a substantial amount of money, there's a particular lifestyle that you have to maintain. And then when that's taken away from you or is threatened by divorce, because divorce can be expensive, believe it or not. And I don't know if people realize that, when you start figuring in the lawyers and, who's going to get half of this, and then, making arrangements, so you might have to move. And then, if you're having problems at work, if you lost a job, or you've been demoted, or you're not making as much money, or maybe none of those things have happened. You're just not making enough money. You're at a job, you've been working all those years, you're not making enough money. Or, and I'm just going to add this in here, people, let's say you were here and you had protection under those immigration law, DACA and all of that. And I'm going to add that in there. And all of a sudden, all these things have been happening and you have lost your job. But you had to pay your bills and now you don't know what you're going to do. Or you were in school and you was things were going smooth for a while and now you can't go to your classes. You don't have enough money to cover your books and your finances. Or if you had some issues, you know, in your relationship and there's a threat of divorce, which can turn into a big fiasco because you're making a certain amount of income together, but if that person is gone now, that changes things. A lot's going to change, and if there's children involved, that's stressful because now you got to decide who's going to keep the kids, and what if you don't want the divorce? Like, for what I was reading, Kate Spade, she didn't want a divorce, and so that's very heartbreaking, especially if you don't know how to what to do. And so it goes on to say that is here it says, I think this gets back to what do we need to be teaching people and how to manage breakups, job stressors, said Christine Mortier, medical director of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. So what are we doing as a nation to help people to manage these things? Because anybody can experience those stresses. Exactly. Anybody, even if you don't make a lot of money, you could go through a number of these issues. Some people are homeless. I mean, they don't have no, they might be in the middle of an eviction or something because they weren't able to make the rent. You wouldn't believe some of the things some people are going through, and that can cause somebody to be extremely stressed out. They don't know who to turn to, and they may contemplate suicide, especially if they don't know what else there is to do. So the rates of suicide for the states and the District of Columbia were calculated using the data from the National Vital Statistics System. So I believe it's really small. You can't really see it, but it talks about known mental health conditions and no known mental health conditions. And it has like some graphs up here, some pie charts. So it goes on to say that information from contributing circumstances for those who died by suicide was obtained by way of the National Violent Death Reporting Systems, which is relatively new in place in only 27 states. So if you think of suicide as the leading cause of death, like AIDS and cancer, with the public health approach, mortality rates decline. Mateer said, we know that the same approach can work with suicide. So it goes on and talks about, now I saw something where it was talking about suicide rates for Black children. It was twice that of white children. Now, I don't know of any situation like that. I don't know. I'm African American. I don't know any Black kid that said, oh, I'm going to kill myself. I don't know of any kid. I think a lot of times what I've experienced now, I'm just saying what I've seen other kids, that, getting enticed into gangs, drugs, things like that. And I'm talking about, people of that are, if they're in that situation. And in my culture, the worry was usually, boys getting into gangs, girls getting pregnant, teen pregnancy. When I was younger, that's what people would worry about. Like when we were like in the 80s, teen pregnancy would seem like it was more teen pregnancy in the 80s for some reason. I don't know why. I guess maybe I'm out of the loop. I don't know. But it seemed like in the 80s, there were more teen pregnancies because I had a couple of friends that happened to. And at the time, they had these schools for girls and, the teen girls that were pregnant, so that they wouldn't be made fun of, when you're around a regular environment, like a regular school session, school, and you happen to be expecting, that they implemented back then in that time, they had these schools for teen mothers so that you wouldn't face, being teased or anything like that because of being, pregnant at a young age. A lot of that was on the rise back then, but I don't know if I hadn't really heard of anything like that right now. I guess because I'm not in At a high school, I guess if I was at a high school, I would see if that was the trend. Right now, the thing at high schools is high school shootings, which is really unfortunate. It's like which one, which pick your poison, and it's like you don't want none of them, but it's like, teen pregnancy is not that great, but at least nobody's killing each other, I'm just saying. But there were problems with that because girls would end up with diseases. Um, and it was also depressing because you're a young girl and you never, you're a baby yourself. And so you don't know what you're gonna do. And so some of those girls would talk about suicide, talk about, "Well, maybe I should kill myself. I don't know how I'm gonna tell my parents that I'm pregnant," and stuff like that. But I don't really hear that much of that going on right now. Now it's high school shootings, um, and it might be some kind of like gang influences, for teens and now this thing with these famous people, because people kind of look up to famous people. You look up to their lives, they kind of are like role models. Look how people respond to the things that they see Kim Kardashian, the Kardashian family do. I really think it's kind of um, pointless, if you ask me. But I guess I'm an older, I'm an older individual. I'm not, like the young people, how they look at that and they get excited. Oh, did you see what Kim Kardashian's wearing and all? So maybe it's a generation thing, but I would think partly because I don't get excited when I see somebody get a new purse that's famous. I'm like, and that's not news. But do you notice the influence that these famous people have on individuals? Some people live through them. And so to hear that these people have it all and all of a sudden they decide to take their lives, some people look at that and they think, oh yeah, it is depressing. The world is just, it's a terrible place. And, there are a lot of bad things going on, but I don't really blame the earth or the world. It's what it is. It's the people in it and what's going on in the minds of the people that are in it. And so this pretty much what this article is laying out. There's a lot of stressors in our lives. And, it's talking about breakups, people losing their homes. And I believe a lot of that is enough to send the person over the edge. Some people are used to living a particular lifestyle. So when you take that away from them, and that's all they ever knew, I have this nice house, I have this nice car, and we always, now I know this is going to sound a little bit religious. I'm not religious, but I'm familiar with it in a lot of ways, believe me. And most of my family was rooted in religion. But, a lot of people are like centered around materialistic items and they got that American dream in their mind. We got the perfect family, I'm doing fine, and all of a sudden something happens in your life, a crisis that alters all of that, takes that whole thing away, or it's just it feels like it's just changed everything. And I will share this. I had a person that was really close in my family, he's like a brother to me, and he was always really, this is kind of difficult for me to say, but I think it's probably something I should say now that I'm talking about this article about, the suicide deaths going up. But this person was really influential to people in my life and to me. And he was diagnosed with cancer. And when he was diagnosed with cancer, it was during a time where, um, with men, that's why I say men should go to the doctor, just like women go to the doctor. He had colon cancer, but He was 40, I think 48 when he was diagnosed with the cancer. And so he wasn't at the age where you're supposed to, I think at a certain age, they say you're supposed to go and get checked for certain cancers, like age 50. And so he wasn't even looking for that. He didn't know that he had it. So when he was diagnosed, he was already in stage 4 because there's stages of cancer. So he was already in stage 4. So he had chemo treatments and things like that. And the chemo treatments caused him to be around at least 3 more years. But when he was diagnosed, what was crazy, I remember how he explained the feeling he had. He said he tried to eat some salad and it didn't go down the right way. And he couldn't understand why it felt like that. And he knew something was wrong, but he finally went. And when he went, he didn't tell us what his diagnosis was. He kind of waited to tell us because we're a part of his family. And so when he did tell us, we all cried. We cried because we realized that we were going to lose somebody that was really close to us. And so this was a moment where, when stuff like that happens, it changes people's lives. So he left behind 2 daughters and 2 godsons. And so the thing that's really sad is that when you lose people that are close in your life, sometimes it makes you contemplate, why am I still here? And you think to yourself, is what's the purpose of this? And then if you know that that person was a good person, somebody that you think, why does it have to be this person to die? Why? Out of all those evil people that are out there, why? You ask yourself those questions. And so stuff like that can happen in a person's life and make you wonder, why do you have to, pick people that are good people? And here you got these crazy people running around, like some of the stories that I've come across, and they have their life. And so you wonder, you ask yourself those serious questions. And so with that being said, I know this is long-winded, um, but this article is coming, it says "To Your Health," and it's coming out of the Washington Post. And so it was written by an Amy Ellis Nutt, and it's has here pictured the CDC. And so what's really sad about all of this is there is a lot of suicide. There is a lot of despair. I think a lot of it too is those expectations that people have to live a particular way. And then when something changes in your life, you can have several deaths. You could have a series of deaths that happen, if, or it could be a loss of a home. Maybe you had a house and everything was going well and you were making, a substantial amount of income. You felt like nothing could change your life. I mean, look what happened to those people in Hawaii. They lost their home in a matter of days. Everything they owned, they lost it because of the natural disaster. All your pictures, your memories, the homes you grew up in, the places you knew that you love, and it's all gone, burned away. You know, um, those type of things can cause people to start to contemplate these things right here. You see, like suicide, and no matter what people say, they'll say, "Oh, it's gonna be all right." Those are some material items. You can get some things you can't get back. You can't get all those things like photos and things like that. You can't get those things. And even if you can rebuild your life, which you can rebuild your life. There's memories, and so it's very hurting. And then if you have an economic downturn and it affects a lot of people, it can cause people to feel depressed. And then the things that are going on right now, all these heated discussions, people arguing with each other back and forth, the hatred that is spewed out there, a lot of racial disparities, people not liking somebody because of how they look or what they have a difference of opinion, people not being able to get along, that kind of stuff can promote this feeling of hopelessness that people will feel, and then it'll make them think, what's the point of being here? And so, like Kate Spade, her situation was, they said she had a history of depression, but I don't really personally know all about her except what they have written. Now, some people have come forward that were close to her, vouched for a lot of it and said, yeah, she did have some problems like with depression, and that she was going through a difficult relationship. Her, was about to end and all that. But times people think, oh, money's gonna make me happy. If I just have this amount of money, I'm gonna be happy. I mean, look at what happened. I just saw something in the news about Farrah Fawcett's son. He was in a robbery in the Venice Beach area. His mother worked all her life. It seemed like she was on movies and TV shows, and then, her son is out there. He was awarded money after she died. I think she died of colon cancer as well. Um, I don't know if that did something to him or something. I don't know. It said he had a history of run-ins with the law, but he might be a different individual altogether. But it's just sometimes money is not what makes people happy, believe it or not. It's deeper. It's deeper. There's a lot of things that can cause people to want to end their lives other than just having a mental illness. And so when you have a heavy heart and maybe you lost some loved ones, several loved ones in your life, or you feel hopeless, or you feel like people are not accepting of you, or you lost your job, or you're at a job where you don't feel appreciated. Some people are working jobs where they don't feel appreciated. They work hard, they do their best, and they feel like it's pointless. And so it might promote drinking, alcohol abuse, like they did mention the opioid crisis. I saw a documentary where this guy, he said he had been on opioids for 3 decades. And it broke my heart because the way this man looked, he virtually, the police officer lady, she didn't really, I think she was going to put him in, they were going to handcuff him and put him in a drug treatment center. But this man, she said, I don't think he's going to be able to get off the opioids if he's been on it that long. And then you could see the guy, he was shaking and he looked like his body was in pain. I guess he was having withdrawal problems. Because all he was doing was looking for the drug. He couldn't hold down a job. When people are like heavily addicted on drugs, that's all they look for is the drugs. I know what that's like because I know somebody that back in the crack era, once they get addicted to those drugs, that's all they want. And they lose their homes, they lose their cars, they lose their loved ones, they lose their relationships because all they can think about is the drugs. The drugs have basically taken over their whole lives. And so it's really sad. And so these are the kind of things that can sometimes cause people to just give up. And I don't think people realize how easy this can happen to anyone. Some people will say, oh, I'm a strong person, and I've heard Black people say this. Well, Black people, they'll just drink. That doesn't make you strong. That's just your way of dealing with the symptoms of depression. Everybody deals with things differently, whether you die in a quick death or a slow death. So it doesn't mean that, one person is able to deal with something, better than the other. necessarily. You just got a different way of dealing with it. Now, I just know that some people may say, I'm not going to kill myself, but I'm going to abuse drugs. They may not say that, but they do it. That's everybody has their coping mechanism. And whether it's a positive or negative, people will do that. I think it's just, some people have to figure out, what do they want to do? Do they want to die a slow death? Do they want to abuse themselves? Do they want to beat themselves up over what they're going through? Do they want to seek, counseling, or do they want to try to go take a walk? Do something that you haven't done. Maybe go to the gym, or go to a park and walk, or talk to a good friend, somebody you can trust, of course. Um, do something that's calming, something that you never do. I know that's what I've tried to do. When I learned that my friend had cancer. Well, it's more than a friend. I would consider him a brother. And it was really hard. Even to this day, we're still dealing with it. And, it's like, I never thought I would come to this. You know, we even tried to go to restaurants, places where when he was alive, where we used to go as a family. We tried to go back to those places, but, you know, places change, people change, things change. We found that some restaurants were closed, that had the restaurants we had visited had been remodeled. They didn't look the same. And believe it or not. And it just seemed like it didn't feel good going there anymore, because the thing that was missing was the person that we lost. And so those can give you feelings of depression. And if you already have like pre-existing history of depression, because some people will have that in their family hereditarily, sometimes you need medication for it. Others may need medications, others may not. They may need, counseling, or they may need redirection of, let's do something happy, not think of something depressing. But with that being said, I'm going to end this video, but it's something to think about, because there's plenty articles that talks about here on, suicide rates and stuff like that. It's just sad, because I think the reason why mainly a lot of this is happening is because of the climate of today and what's going on. When you hear about high schools, the school shootings, young people feeling, like, wow, we're not safe even in our schools. When you hear about the church shootings, it's not safe to go to places that people worship, go to worship. And, even if you're not heavily religious, some people will go to church just because they want to be around people. You don't want to be by yourself. So you want to have somebody to talk to kind of like, you know, that make you feel a little bit upbeat. But if you feel unsafe, even in places of worship, I mean, it can be pretty depressing. And here in like the city of Los Angeles, and I'm seeing a lot across the U.S., a lot of cities, the housing, there's housing costs are expensive. Like people who want to be homeowners, it's hard to find a house, or it's hard to, there's a whole host of factors, of course, but the cost of living has sharply gone up. Um, that can be depressing, because you feel like that American dream is not attainable for you. Um, so there's a lot of things that I don't think people realize or consider, that could cause people to become extremely depressed. Well, with that being said, this is the article is out of the Los Angeles Times, and you just got to know who to talk to. And if you feel like you need to reach out to somebody, if you have somebody that's close to you that you feel you can trust, that might be a start. They do have numbers, hotline numbers. You might have to go on your search engine and look in your local area what kind of hotline numbers there are if you feel like you're contemplating suicide. Or it could be something even deeper. Maybe there's hereditary depression in your family where you might need to be on medication. You might have to go through your healthcare provider and find out what mental health offerings they have for you in those areas. So, with that being said, I'm going to leave this at that. But this article and among many that pertain to this is not a surprise at all. Well, be safe on this weekend and take care and have some upbeat thoughts. And, you know, we only live one life, and you have to do the best that you can and be the best that you can and be happy, even if you don't have a lot. Material items and money is not the only thing that makes people happy. There's a lot of other things, sometimes the simplest things that you would take for granted, like having, like what I had mentioned, I had a brother that died of cancer when he was here, just having him around was happiness. But now we have to realize the reality is that you have to go on with your life. Even when people you love or people that you care about pass on, you have to have a mindset where you think, despite this person having the the cancer and he passed on, that I have to keep living my life. And so I have to think positively, even if it sometimes doesn't feel good. Well, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.